Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have a list of my top 10 favorite Screamo releases. Now the reason I'm doing like an all-encompassing list of releases counting albums, splits, demos, EPs, rather than just full lengths is that you'll find with this genre a lot of the time, most of the best material is on demos and splits and EPs and other type of releases rather than full-length albums, because a lot of these bands, their albums are just discography compilations, because a lot of these bands never even put out actual full lengths. And on those compilations, you'll find that there's like standout songs, which you'll realize are all from the same release. So we're just doing all types of releases on this list. It's mostly full-length albums, though. And of course, I hate to go all like real emo copy pasta on you guys, but you should all know that I'm talking about the really dissonant, extreme subgenre of hardcore from the late 90s and early 2000s. If you don't know what that is, just make a quick fucking Google search. This isn't the right video for you to be watching. But if you're new to the genre, honestly, most of this list are pretty good releases to start with. And if you're a fan of extreme music in general, this is a pretty, like, weird but good genre to get into, to be honest, because it combines a lot of elements from other things that I like, that a lot of people who like extreme metal or punk or hardcore like. It makes this really interesting, huge sound that encompasses a lot of experimentation and leaves a lot of room for creativity. It was kind of hard to fit like just 10 releases into this list because this is one of my favorite genres and there's a lot of bands and releases that I fucking love. So I have a pretty big list of honorable mentions. I'll just list them off really quickly right now. We got Usurp Synapse with their split with Hassan Isabah, also known as the Just Do It split. Love Lost But Not Forgotten, self-titled. Tristan Zara, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, their discography compilation. Loma Prieta's RLP is your EP. La Quayette's La Fin Non Elafim. Portraits of Past, self-titled. Reversal of Man, This Is Medicine. And one of my favorites that almost barely made the list, Tears of Averell's self-titled demo. Alright, so kicking off the actual list with number 10, we have Mitsubishi Suicide with their self-titled album from 2023. This is probably the newest release that I have on this list. I generally prefer kind of the older Screamo stuff, but this album fucking rules. This band is from the UK and they play a post-rock influenced style of Screamo. But they have kind of a different approach than a lot of the other bands of this style. Bands like Funeral Diner or City of Caterpillar will take regular Screamo songs and beef them up with some like post-rock parts in the middle of the song that make these big, like, atmospheric long songs. While Mitsubishi Suicide, they feel a lot more like a post-rock band with Screamo parts in there that really break up the like kind of slower, more melodic parts with just absolute fucking frenzy to where it almost fucking jump scares you in some parts. What I really love about this album is just how fucking brooding and like dark it is. I feel like it's one of the darkest albums in the genre, which, I mean, there's a lot to compete with as far as that goes. But this album has this weird and mysterious sort of feel to it. Lyrically, it's very interesting as well. There's not published lyrics for every song on this album, but one of the songs that does have published lyrics is a song for Kiara H, which, for those who don't know, is about this like 4chan girl who like died, I think, of like a drug overdose or something. And another thing that's really interesting about this album is the way they build up so much tension and release within these really long songs, and it just creates this like really interesting listen that you really feel like you're being taken on a journey throughout all, I think it's 5 of these songs. It's about a half an hour album, but each song is pretty long, about like 7 to 10 minutes long, I would say. Easily my favorite song on this album is the last song, Shooting Myself with an Amazonian Blowgun. This song really builds up an interesting atmosphere as it goes along, because it starts out like insanely fucking brooding and ominous sounding and moody until it just releases this explosion of like catchy melody at the end that's just super fucking groovy and emotional sounding. The vocals on this album are really weird. He does a lot of clean vocals which sound fine. They're like kind of post-rock, sort of like indie sounding vocals. And when he screams, sometimes they sound like regular traditional Screamo vocals, and there's other times where he just lets loose and it sounds very weird and charismatic, but it works really well for how raw the portrayal of emotion is on this album. I'm really looking forward to seeing what else this band does. They've released a few songs since then, but I don't really think they live up to this release, at least in my opinion. But when it comes to the post-rock style of Screamo, it's something I have to be in the mood for, but this album just always fucking hits, so I had to include this one on the list. Coming in at number 9, we have another self-titled release, Hassan Isabah with their self-titled EP from 2000. This band didn't really release a lot of stuff in general, and their career was pretty short-lived, as far as I know. But this EP is just fucking monumental, in my opinion. They play a pretty traditional style of emo violence, mixing power violence with emo and screamo. But it's a lot more unhinged, I feel, in like an emotional sort of way. The vocals on here are just fucking scary sounding at some points. There's moments on the album where it almost sounds like he's crying as the band slows down into these more kind of dreamy sounding melodic parts, and it's really interesting and just sublime sounding. You could tell that these guys were in like hardcore bands before they started this project, because there's a lot of faster kind of D-beat sounding parts on here that build the energy really well. There's only 4 songs on here, but the one song on here that stands out to me the most is the second song, Watching the Eyes of Someone Lying, I believe is what it's called. That song is one of my favorite Screamo songs of all time. I don't have much else to say about this release. It's pretty easy to enjoy if you're already into the genre. It's not the best to start with, but I wouldn't say it's the worst to start with either. It's pretty standard, but it's not quite as essential as some of the other albums that we'll talk about later on this list, but it's definitely one of my favorites. Next up on the list, we have I Hate Myself with 4 songs, came out in 1997. This one almost didn't make the list because it kind of barely counts as Screamo. It is emo music with primarily screamed vocals, and a lot of the fan base for this band overlaps with the fan base for pretty much all the other bands on this list. I think it counts enough, although you could call it a regular emo album if you wanted to, but I really wanted to fit this on the list because I like it. All 4 songs on here rule, but song 2 especially stands out to me for being really catchy and a lot more kind of energetic and upbeat musically, but definitely not fucking lyrically. This band has a lot of interesting rumors about them, most of which aren't true. The most commonly known one is people will say that this band was like a joke band, like parodying emo music because their lyrics were so over the top and whiny, and you know, they had like the wordy long song titles, which you would see on later releases. Obviously all 4 songs on this EP are untitled, but this band was kind of a trendsetter, I feel, in starting like the like references to nerd culture and stuff like that. Like on their full length, you've got songs referencing like Dragon Ball and shit. But on this release, things were a lot more just kind of emotional lyrically. It's really over the top, but it's very like almost self-aware in this weird like post-ironic sort of way that I really admire, because it just feels very honest. All 4 songs on here have a lot of like kind of clean guitar parts, and then the choruses usually are more aggressive and distorted and have the screamed vocals. They're really catchy songs. Think of this band as like an autistic Sunny Day an even more autistic Sunny Day Real Estate, like on heroin or something. Like, it's just really fucking depressive, nerdy sounding emo music, and I fucking love this EP so much. Alright, next up on the list, coming in at number 7, we have I Wrote Haikus About Cannibalism in Your Yearbook with their self-titled album from 2009. This is one of the most essential albums in the genre and one of the most influential, especially of the past like 20 or so years. A lot of bands took cues from this band, both in terms of sound and aesthetic. A lot of the like, you know, like sentence compressed into one word, long names and stuff like that. This band plays a style of emo violence that mixes Midwest emo in there, which normally I'm not a big fan of, but the way this band does it is so much more interesting than I feel a lot of bands do it, because what they do is they take the more whimsical sounding kind of noodly Midwest emo riffs through the filter of all the insanity and dissonance that you would find in Screamo, and it creates this really beautiful kind of like dreamy kind of like just twisted fucking sound. The lyrics on this album are very simple yet really effective. I mean, there's parts where he uses some really interesting and strange metaphors, and then there's other parts where he just fucking loses it and screams about like wanting to die and shit. There's two vocalists in this band. One has kind of a more of like a whiny, kind of shouty sort of scream, and the other guy has more high-pitched, like kitten-core vocals, as some people like to call them, like those super high-pitched, just shrieking fucking vocals. This is probably one of, if not the most, like, actually emotional albums on the list. I saw a YouTube comment once that I fucking loved that described this album as, like, someone's personal home recording that you weren't supposed to hear. Because that's what it feels like when you listen to this album. There's some moments on here where it just gets so intense, like, emotionally, to where, like, you know, the chord rings out and he'll be screaming something crazy over it. And there's this weird kind of moment of not complete silence, but things kind of mellow out right after it reaches this peak of intensity. And you just kind of sit there just like, damn, like, fucking, this album is just so expressive and creates these really interesting kind of conversational, almost like song structures that I really enjoy. One of my favorite moments on this album is on, I believe it's either song 7 or 9, I forget the number. Every song on here is untitled, which is kind of another trope with this genre, where there's this kind of really pretty sounding, like, whimsical riff, and it's just so insanely fucking catchy. Alright, coming up next on the list, we have a really underrated one, in my opinion, You and I with The Curtain Falls. This came out in 1999, and I think this is the last release this band ever put out before they disbanded. I know some of the members of this band went on to be in Neil Perry, which is really cool. But anyways, You and I mixes the traditional dissonant style of emo violence with some melodic kind of post-hardcore sensibilities, and it makes this really interesting and dynamic sort of sound that's insanely fucking catchy. There's a lot of clean vocals weaved in between the screams on this album that have this almost kind of Weezery kind of sound to it, because they're whiny sounding vocals, but the guy has a deeper voice, which reminds me more of some of the Midwest emo bands like The Promise Ring or Braid. But the songwriting on here is just fucking incredible. This band utilizes dual guitars very well because they create a lot of interesting harmonies that shine through the noisy raw production and all the just blast beats and screaming and crazy shit going on. The songwriting on here is just fucking peak though. 143 JCM is like in my top 3 favorite Screamo songs ever fucking written, man. Coming up next on the list at number 5, we've got an absolute fucking classic, Page 99 with Document Number 8. This might have been the album that got me into the genre. I mean, I heard a few other bands like Orchid and Sasha pretty early on as well, but this one was just fucking life-changing to me. I remember listening to the first song on here, which is easily the best on the album and is kind of like their hit, In Love with an Apparition, and as soon as it hit like the part, if you've heard the song, you know what I'm talking about. I just instantly got fucking goosebumps, and I was just like, dude, what the fuck am I listening to? But yeah, this band I feel like is one of the easiest to get into if you're a lot more kind of a metal sort of guy, or even if you're into like hardcore. I mean, this band has a lot of kind of convergy sounding parts to them. It's pretty dissonant, but their melodic parts are interesting and pretty experimental at times even. I came really close to putting Document Number 5 on this list instead, but I think I listened to this album a lot more in general, and my favorite songs are mostly on this album, besides Comedy of Christ, which is on Document Number 5. That's an essential song you should probably listen to if you're getting into this band, but regardless, anyways, Document Number 8, it's super aggressive, but experimental at the same time, to where there's parts where it's kind of post-rock influenced, it gets atmospheric and weird sounding, but it's kind of punky too, and it has this like fuck you kind of attitude to it that I really enjoy. It's not as melodramatic or like overly emotional as a lot of the other albums on this list, so if that's kind of a turnoff for you, this is a pretty good album to start with for the genre. But this is just absolute fucking essential listening if you're a fan of this genre, or especially if you're getting into it. Also, the album cover done by, I believe, their vocalist, Chris, one of my favorite fucking album covers of all time. But yeah, there's not much else I could say about this album that hasn't been said. Just incredible wall of sound with this album. It's just very chaotic but melodic and just almost entrancing. I fucking love this album. Coming in at number 4, we have another kind of formative sort of band for me when it came to me getting into this genre. We got Sasha with their self-titled demo from 1999. Now this has 4 of the most like perfect songs ever written in this genre. Closed Hands, Venus and Bacchus, The Burden of Reflecting, and One Dying Wish, which is easily my favorite on the release and might be my favorite Screamo song ever written. At one point, this band was my favorite in the genre until I got really into the rest of the bands you'll see in the top 3. But man, the songwriting on here I feel like is on a much higher level than a lot of the rest of the genre, because rather than creating these kind of power violence influenced like minute-long bursts of just like aggression and melody, Stacia mixes elements of Midwest emo and post-hardcore to create some songs that are very well written. Lyrically, I feel like their level of like metaphors are on a much more poetic sort of level than a lot of the other stuff in the genre. It's definitely not like surface level sort of lyricism. They get pretty deep with it. The songs are very melodramatic, even compared to a lot of the other stuff on this list, but it's really enjoyable to listen to if you're a fan of this kind of stuff. One Dying Wish is just a perfect fucking song. It comes out with this like really slow build-up that sounds almost kind of happy, and then things kind of get a little bit moodier, and then it builds into this really just pretty sounding melodic but like powerful sounding passage that builds up into this vocal break that's just so fucking sick. I really love how this band kind of not necessarily established but solidified a lot of the tropes of the genre, done in a way that's just really enjoyable to listen to. Like I said, the songs are just written extremely well on here. It's fun to listen to, it's catchy, but it's extremely expressive and emotional at the same time. It's very endearing to listen to, and I can't sing enough praises to this release. It's just one of the best ever made in this genre. Alright, now into the top 3. I consider these to be like the holy trinity of fucking emo violence, at least just for me with my taste. Number 3 is a pretty underrated one as well. It's a newer album. We have Echelons, aka Unable to Fully Embrace This Happiness, with The Morning Sun and The End of the World. This one came out in 2017, and if you're not familiar with this band, I believe they're from Austria, and this band basically feels like a mixture of Orchid and Tristan Zara, with the most like insanely fucking raw production. I read that this album was recorded on a webcam microphone and a dictaphone, which is insane. I mean, this is one of the most raw albums in the genre that I've heard, at least. This band has this interesting kind of triumphant sort of sound to a lot of their melodies that I really fucking enjoy. I was talking earlier about bands like I Hate Myself establishing that trope of like kind of having nerdy sort of references within the songs. This band does a lot of that. They were inspired by the author of Poon Poon manga that everyone probably fucking knows at this point. But they did it before it was fucking cool, man. There's so many interesting references in the lyrics on here. The songwriting is just so fucking good. It's both melodic and like just really distorted and ugly sounding. This album, like when you really blast it in your ears, and especially on the Bandcamp upload of this album, for some reason on Spotify it's a little more quiet, but the files on the Bandcamp version of this album are really fucking loud. It just feels like the album is like screaming into your ears. It is so noisy and aggressive in the way that's just insanely satisfying to listen to. This band has some cool vocals as well. His voice kind of gets buried in the instruments a few times, but sometimes he does these kind of whiny sounding sort of clean vocals that are really expressive and just like kind of fucked up sounding. But easily my favorite song on the album has to be track 3, The Happy Ending Foreshadows the Forthcoming Drama. I think that's how it's called. That song is just so well written. I love that like almost kind of black metal-y sounding riff at the beginning. This band wasn't necessarily like black metal influenced, but the raw production mixed with the like melodic like tremolo riffs and blast beats makes it almost feel kind of black metal-y in a way. So if you're into black metal, I think this is kind of an interesting album to start with for Screamo if you're new to the genre. But this is easily one of my favorites to listen to. It's really short and really aggressive, but it's just insanely fucking expressive at the same time, and I feel like this band really understands the genre a lot better than a lot of other newer Screamo and emo violence bands do. So putting this one in the top 3 was kind of a no-brainer for me at this point. I know it's not the most well-known album, but it's one of my personal favorites. All right, coming in at number 2, we have a pretty obvious one for this list, Orchid with Chaos Is Me. I mean, how the fuck are you going to make a top 10 Screamo albums list without Orchid in there? I know some people prefer their sophomore album, Dance Tonight, Revolution Tomorrow, which is equally as perfect of a fucking album, but this one definitely takes the edge for me. This album is just super fucking pissed off sounding. It's equally as emotional as it is just like frustrated and fucking angry sounding. I mean, when you listen to this album, it feels like it's like you and this album against the whole fucking world. It's just has this like triumphant sort of sound to it, to where it feels like, yeah, this band is like frustrated and sad and angry, but they're kind of like persisting through it with this like kind of triumphant sort of sound, which I really enjoy. I love the use of like octave chords on here. It's very Power Violence influenced. This album is just super fast and aggressive and kind of grindcore-y sounding even. If you're like a more of a metal fan, this is definitely one of the best things you could listen to getting into the genre pretty early on. The songwriting on here is just fucking incredible. I love Jason Green's vocals, especially at that end part of New Jersey versus Valhalla, which is easily my favorite song on this album. But yeah, just incredible fucking songwriting in a very compact sort of package. The song is, or not song, album is around like 20 minutes long. I think it's a little less than 20 minutes. But it's just a super fun album to listen to. It's very expressive and energetic. And there's not much else I could really say about Chaos Is Me that hasn't been said before. All right, so my number 1 spot goes to none other than Jerome's Dream with Seeing Means More Than Safety. This is their debut album released in 2000. And to me, this album perfectly encapsulates everything that I love about this genre. This album is like the style of Screamo that I love the most. That super fucking dissonant, aggressive, kind of mathcore sounding almost style of emo violence. This album has crazy fucking vocals, which actually didn't really click with me at first until I found out that their vocalist recorded, I don't know if obviously he didn't record the album without a mic, but he would perform live without a mic. He would play bass and like just scream into the air. And if you watch videos of the band playing live, you could actually hear it, which is insane. The riffs are just super fucking dissonant, but in a very well-written way. This album is just insanely fucking violent sounding, but played with this like heartbroken sense of urgency that just feels very powerful to listen to. The lyrics on this album are super fucking bleak and dark and emotional in a way that's just very resonating and like expressive and really interesting to me. You wonder what the story behind a lot of the songs on here is. The first song on here, Second Grade Art Project, might be my favorite on the album. But man, the first time I ever heard It's More Like a Message to You, it was like actually life-changing and made me want to start writing music in the style of this band. I mean, just that one part with the riff, I'm sure you know if you've heard it before. But yeah, I don't even really know what to say about this album without making this video like over fucking 20 minutes long, because Jesus Christ, this album is just flawless. And I know I keep repeating how great I think this album is. But every song on here is really interestingly written. They use the dissonance to create these weird and creepy alien sounding melodies. The drumming is super fucking like mathy and interesting sounding. This band has kind of a like weird time signature thing going on in a lot of the parts, but it's not overbearing to where it's like, what the fuck is going on? But it's really smart sounding. And I'm not sure what else I could really say about this album, but yeah, Jerome's Dream, Seeing Means More Than Safety is easily my favorite fucking Screamo album ever written. But yeah, that concludes this list. I hope you guys enjoyed, and maybe you can tell me some of your favorites in the comments down below. And if you're new to the genre, definitely check out a lot of these albums. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.